Harbinger Down, also sometimes known as Inanimate, which is definitely not as cool a name, so I don't know why they did that, is a 2015 independent horror film, which is notable, among other things, for being partially, and the majority of its funding, in fact, comes from fan funding. Over $380,000 was raised to make this film, and the film was made to be an homage to a couple of different things. Now, the movies, in particular, that it was made to be an homage to include The Thing and Alien. And those are two of my favourite films. The Thing, in fact, is my favourite film of all time. And Alien, I also love, even more than Aliens, in fact. But the second thing that this film is made to pay homage to is not just other movies, but methods used in movies. And this is something which I've discussed on the channel before. And that is practical special effects. CGI is okay, but if at all possible, especially in a horror film, I do really like to see good quality and imaginative special effects, with The Thing arguably, but definitely in my opinion, being the absolute pinnacle of special effects of any movie ever. Now, this film manages to do something which I really admire, and that is it manages to pay homage to films like Alien and The Thing, but especially The Thing. But it does it in such a way that it really pays its respects to that and honours the atmosphere and the style and the fan base wants of that kind of movie, what the people want to see from it. But at the same time, it avoids the very easy route of just copying the film. Because although this film, if you do watch it, bears many, many similarities to The Thing in particular, sometimes very close similarities, it does so in a way that if you actually think about it and compare the two, they're not the same. They are similar, but oftentimes they will be opposites. For instance, The Thing and Harbinger Down are both set in claustrophobic environments where the people involved cannot get away, and it's very cold. Those are both very similar, but with The Thing, you're on land. In Harbinger Down, you're on a boat. In The Thing, it's all guys. In Harbinger Down, there are women as well. So it's similar enough to be an homage, but there are plenty of differences in there as well. And one of my personal favourite differences about Harbinger Down, and this isn't really a spoiler, I believe you even see it in the trailer, is that in The Thing, if you've seen that movie, one of the best weapons that they have is a flamethrower. In this movie, they have a weapon which, again, is similar to that, I believe, an homage. I believe they very deliberately did it this way. But what's clever about it is that the weapon, though similar, is the exact opposite. Instead of being a flamethrower, it's a liquid nitrogen gun, if you want to call it that, used for freezing crabs on this fishing boat. That's cool, because it has just as great an effect on stopping a bacterial life form such as The Thing or the creature on Harbinger Down, but it does it in the exact opposite way to a flamethrower. That's really cool, and I don't believe that they did that by accident. Being so similar yet so different at the same time really impresses me. It's simple things like that that I really like in films, the little details that really mean a lot to someone who's a fan of the, not necessarily source material, but the inspiration for a film like this. Now, that being said, and as good as the practical effects are, I mean, considering that the film is written, produced, and directed by Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr., who are both involved in Amalgamated Dynamics, who is a company that will be well known to fans of creatures such as Alien and Predator, and some others as well, as skilled as they are at practical effects, and there really are some really cool practical effects in this film, the film isn't without its drawbacks. And the most obvious drawback, one which they can't really do much about, is of course production quality. There are certain times when a film will go beyond its raw pieces, its raw spec, if you will, and the film will have a certain magic to it that goes beyond the budget. The Thing managed to do that. It has a charm. And although this film has its own charm in a similar way, it doesn't have the same kind of finish. It's not as polished as The Thing. And you may not think of The Thing as being a polished film, But when you watch this film in comparison, you'll see what I mean. The Thing has that magic spark that just pushes it over the edge to make it a great film. Regardless, to be honest, of if you're a horror fan or not, it's just a great movie. This film doesn't quite have that finish to it. It's a great effort, a great homage, it's a lot of fun, and if you like The Thing, you'll definitely like this. But it just doesn't have that same kind of legendary magic to it. Now, obviously, they couldn't get that kind of finish to it because they just didn't have the budget. But it's a shame, because you see that the potential for that is definitely there. The story in this film in particular is clever. It's, again, similar to The Thing, but at the same time, different. And it is a clever story. There are more twists and turns than in The Thing. The Thing is a great story, but it's a relatively simple one. This does have more twists to it. That doesn't necessarily make it a better film, but it is nice to see that they had their own ideas. They weren't just aping The Thing, they took it their own way and they went with it. Now, as far as the cast, there aren't really a huge amount of people in the film. I liked the characters that were in it for the most part. There were one or two annoying moments with some characters, but that's to be expected in genre films. And the only character that most people will probably recognise is the captain of the boat, Lance Henriksen. And he's a great choice. He's a genre actor. He's known in multiple films such as Aliens, Pumpkinhead, and I think a few others as well. So to have him in a film like this is a nice little homage in its own right. More well-known actors would have been great, but even in The Thing, not necessarily all of the actors were huge caliber, even at their time. So that's not really a fault against the film. It's just, again, something which could have been nice, but at the same time you can completely understand why that wasn't the case. Of course, they can't get huge A-list actors on this because they just don't have that kind of budget. Now, I would say that it's very important to have seen The Thing before you watch this movie. Because if you go into this film without having already seen John Carpenter's The Thing, you may enjoy this film, but you won't really understand why it is the way it is. This is a film which benefits from its inspiration. If you watch the inspiration to this movie first, you will appreciate this film even more. So I would definitely recommend checking out The Thing before you watch this movie. If you do so, if you've already seen The Thing, then go ahead and see this, because you pretty much know the beats of the story for the most part, and you'll be able to appreciate the homages that it gives. But for those who are perhaps unfamiliar with the inspiration, The Thing, basically the story of this movie, without of course spoiling anything that you don't already see in the trailer, is that a group of people on a fishing boat are tracking some whales to assess the effects of global warming. And they stumble across a peculiar piece of ice containing some interesting things. And basically it goes from there. It's a monster movie, so you can work out the rest. And that's basically all you need to know about the plot. It doesn't really get more complicated than that. That's all it needs to be, just like The Thing. But then, what about our 5 distinct categories? First of all, as always, we have the story and the plot. And for the story and plot of Harbinger Down, aka Inanimate, I prefer Harbinger Down because it makes more sense, I'm going to give the movie a 6. Because although it's certainly not the most convoluted or necessarily cleverest of plots or stories, it does what it needs to do. It's as simple as it needs to be, and as I said, there are some twists in there which The Thing doesn't have. So I respect it for that. I'm not going to give it a huge rating because of it, but I like what they did. So for the story, I'm going to give it a 6. As far as the characters and their motivations, I'm going to give it a 7. And the reason why I'm giving it a 7 isn't because any of them are unbearably bad. There are certainly one or two who are a little annoying, to say the least, some more than others. For the most part, I like the people who were playing in the film. I like the characters that they played. And they were different enough to not just look like a group of people who all blend together. They certainly don't. Overall, though, as I said earlier, some not necessarily A-list actors, but at least some slightly better known actors, maybe even an actor or two from The Thing. That would have been very on the nose, but to fans of The Thing, that wouldn't have been pushing it too far. That would have been great. That would have completely pushed it over the edge for being a superb homage. Now, they didn't do that, but I personally think that would have been cool. However, I like what they did, and I'm giving it a 7 in that regard. The characters' motivations make sense for the most part. They are certainly more than others complicated in different ways, and yeah, I just like them basically. As far as the visuals and effects, which are of course in a movie like this hugely important, possibly even the most important thing, especially given its inspiration, I'm going to give the film a 10, because although the practical effects at times can be a little on the side of camp, whereas The Thing should have been campy, but at the same time kind of isn't, because it plays it so straight. On this film, there are a few campy moments with the creatures, but I still really liked what they did. I like the design of the creatures. I love the fact that just like The Thing, it changes all the time, which prevents it from getting boring. And overall, I love what they did with the look, especially on the budget that they had, and it's a fantastic showcase of those special effects. Now, there is some CGI used, but thankfully that CGI is not used to create creatures. It's only used to delete, as it were, the wires and gimbals used in the practical effects. And to me, that's perfectly acceptable. That allows the CGI to complement the practical effects rather than to overbear on them. Now, as far as the audio, the soundtrack of the film, the audio design in general, I'm going to give the film a 7, because like with The Thing, the sound design of the creature is very good, it's varied and ominous. The music, although not as iconic as The Thing, and probably never will be, is good enough. And the overall sound design complements the claustrophobic environment, but overall certainly isn't incredible, it's just good. So I'm going to give it, as I said, a 7. And finally, of course, for the most subjective to me personally, the rewatchability and entertainment factor. And for that, I'm going to give this film a 9. And I'd really like to give it a 10, but the only thing that prevents it from being a full 10 is just that slight drop in quality compared to The Thing. Now, really, it's unfair to compare it to The Thing and have that result in a bad score. But a 9 isn't a bad score for a start, and the problem with having inspiration is, of course, people are going to compare it to the film that you're making an homage of. So as such, you pretty much have to compare it to The Thing. Now, that being said, it stands on its own, if you haven't seen The Thing, great, as a low-budget independent monster movie. But compared to The Thing, which the makers of the film themselves want you to, it has to be a little bit less in that regard, mainly for the overall polish. It doesn't quite have the magic of The Thing, but it certainly has charm. It's definitely rewatchable, and I enjoyed it. So it's a 9 from me. And overall, that means that our tabulated score is a definitely very respectable 3.9 out of 5, which is not that far behind The Thing, but of course behind nonetheless. But still, a very, very respectable score, especially for a film on its budget, which is a tiny budget compared to many modern horror films. And I would say this is better than the vast majority of more recent, much bigger budget horror films that I've seen, even ones from notable existing franchises, be it reboots or sequels. So overall, if you haven't seen this movie, which definitely a lot of people haven't, and of course, if you're a fan of The Thing, Splinter, The Blob, any of those kind of practical, iconic horror monsters, definitely check out this film if you can. And that's about it for this review. So I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.